the simplicity of God. How strange a perfection, the simplicity of God. By simple, we do not mean that God is slow or dim-witted, nor do we mean that God is easy for us to understand. No. Simple, as a divine perfection, is the opposite of compound. The simplicity of God means that He is not made up of His perfections. He does not consist of a little bit of goodness and a little bit of mercy and a little bit of power and a little bit of justice. Even as we looked at last night, He's not 30% love or 30% mercy and 29% sovereign and 1% wrath. No, He is all His perfections all the time. Simplicity teaches that God is goodness, God is mercy, God is justice, God is power. Every perfection of God is identical to His essence. Therefore, one should not think that one perfection of God is more central to God's essence than another perfection, as if He is more love than just. This is a common error, but one which the doctrine of simplicity helps us avoid. Simplicity means that God is immaterial. God is not composed of parts. Therefore, it could be stated that simplicity is the incommunicable attribute by which the divine nature is conceived by us, not only as free from all composition and division, but also as incapable of composition and divisibility. The Belgic Confession of Faith of 1561, Article 1 reads, "We believe in the heart and confess with the mouth that there is a unique and simple spiritual being who is called God, eternal, incomprehensible, invisible, unchangeable, and infinite, who is wise and the overflowing source of all good things." The London Baptist Confession of 1689 confesses it twice. In chapter 2, section 1, it says, God is without parts. And then again in section 3, it says, God is not to be divided in nature and being. This understanding was true for every successive generation, back to the earliest church fathers, including Calvin, Luther, the medieval theologians, Athanasius, Augustine, and the like. God is independent in His being. God is independent in His being. He cannot depend on what is not Himself to be Himself. No one contributes a part to God because He is not composed of parts. One example, Romans 11 verse 35 says, "Or who has first given to Him that it might be repaid to Him?" Answer, no one. Who gives to God? To say that He does not lack is to say there are no parts He needs. Parts always give actuality to wholes, but God doesn't have anyone who gives to Him. God is not a composite of parts. He lacks nothing and He needs nothing. Scripture affirms this in a diversity of ways, often highlighting various perfections, such as Isaiah 40 verse 14, which says that no one has informed God, no one has been His counselor or taught Him justice. He does not lack a part of wisdom or knowledge or information that He needs. His love is independent. After Israel's apostasy, He says in Hosea 14 verse 4, "I will heal their apostasy, I will love them freely." It is not conditioned upon them to do something for Him to love them. We don't deserve God's love, and there's nothing that we can do to deserve His love. It's not conditioned upon us. He wasn't moved by their loveliness. God's love is not dependent on any part of the creature. Even His knowledge is not dependent on us. God knows creatures, but doesn't need creatures in order to know them. Augustine of Hippo said, "For all of us, things inform our knowledge, where in God's case, His knowledge gives form to things." We need things in order to inform our knowledge. God doesn't need anything to inform His knowledge. He is not dependent upon parts. if you consider a car, before it's assembled on the assembly line, it's really just a bunch of parts. You might see a bumper, but the bumper alone, that lacks mobility. In fact, it's probably one of the less important parts of the car. You wouldn't say that a tire is a car. It's just a part of the car. And we could go on and on and on. Romans 4:17 says, God, who gives life to the dead and calls into being that which does not exist. Being the creator, God doesn't depend upon anyone for his existence. He is not fashioned. He is of necessity self-existing. Divine simplicity does not imply that God has no features. Nevertheless, he has no parts, and so is not divisible. God's perfections, like love and justice and mercy, they are not component parts in God. They are all the same reality. He is all loving, all justice, all merciful, all the time. We'll conclude this perfection with John Owen's quote. John Owen said, "The attributes of God," referring to the simplicity of God, which alone seem to be distinct things in the essence of God, are all of them essentially the same with one another, and everyone the same with the essence of God himself. The simplicity of God.